I'm delighted to announce that my new course for Chessable on the Kalashnikov Sicilian is going to be published on Monday, the 27th of September, just a couple of days' time. It's taken me a long time to complete it. I'm really pleased with the results. And yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about Kalashnikov's strategy, what this opening is all about in this video. So the Chessable course is, as usual, part of the Chessable format. So it has these trainable variations. So you present a complete repertoire for black with this move, 4e5. But there are two sections to the course, actually. There's the usual trainable variations, but I also present 17 model games, I've specially selected them, that really illustrate Kalashnikov's strategy, not just in the opening, but in the middle game as well. And I think that's a really important part of the course. So it's not just about learning these variations by rote, which that is a part of it, and that's important. But I'm going to give you a really good idea of how to play the middle game with the Kalashnikov as well. And what I want to do with this game is just give you a little introduction to the Kalashnikov, a little introduction into the kind of strategy that's involved. So this is a game played in the Hungarian Team Championship. Robert Veres with white against Peter Horvath with black. You know, these are not well-known players, but I think that this just gives a really good idea of what you might expect with black. So, first of all, we should note that after e5, this of course is a forcing move. The knight is attacked. So there are, let's see, how many squares? There's 1, 2, 3, well, I'll discount e6, 4, 5, 6 options for this knight. What's interesting is that only one of those options actually gives white any chance for an opening advantage. 5 out of those 6 moves, black equalizes so easily. The only move which is at all testing is knight b5. So I think, you know, that's, if you're playing this online or something, then already that is a big advantage for black, that white can go wrong very easily with one of these very plausible moves at an early stage. These moves are absolutely fine for black. So knight b5 and d6. But I think from black's viewpoint, what I really like about this move is that actually already we've got a slightly unusual position on the board where white has put the knight on b5, and actually that knight is clearly going to be driven back, and white needs to think, well, how do I recycle that knight to a good position? So already you're presenting your opponent with some interesting problems actually to solve. So knight c3 is the most popular move, and we push the knight back to the side of the board. And now the old move here is b5, but I like bishop e7, and that's the move that I concentrate on in the course. Basically, black wants to develop with knight f6, but we don't play knight f6 straight away because that avoids bishop g5. That's the point of playing bishop e7 first. So the main move here is knight e3, but in this game, the main move is knight c4, but in this game, white played bishop e3, which is reasonable, and only then knight c4. Now in the course, I actually recommend pawn to b5 as the main move. But here, black played castles, which is also very reasonable, a very decent move for this. Rarely anything wrong with castling. So knight b6 attacks the rook. So white seems to have quite a nice bind, but you know, watch out for moves like knight g4, attacking that bishop. So bishop e2, bishop e6, and I do love that bishop on e6. It's such a chunky square, and it's sort of protected by this pawn chain d6 and e5. And this, of course, really it gives the Kalashnikov its character. You have these pawns on d6 and e5, which gives black real central control, and that's why I like this opening. It is very classical, actually. but there are dynamic elements to it, as we're going to see. So white castles. Now, you can see that white has some control over these squares. So what black does is fights for control. So first of all, black gets rid of that knight on b6, or challenges it anyway. And if the knight comes back to d5, then bishop g5, and this is such a common move. For it's a very positional idea. The bishop isn't so good on e7, so it comes to g5, exchanges it off. After that exchange, you can see the knight can come into d4. And this positional idea of planting that knight on the beautiful d4 square, supported by those pawns, this is such a common idea in the Kalashnikov. It's really nice. And once that knight gets to d4, then interesting tactics occur. So let's go back here. So instead of knight back to d5, white exchanged and queen takes. So now you can see the rooks are connected. I like that. We like rooks to be connected. But white plays the knight into d5. So, you might think, well, white has some kind of positional advantage here. But watch how black fights that. First of all, let's see what we're doing with that bishop. Well, it can't come to g5 in this case. Bishop d8. Now, I love this move. I call this in the course the bad bishop bounce. The bishop bounces off the back rank, and very often we see this bishop bouncing out, whoops, not there, to b6 or even a5 sometimes. But there's more to that bishop d8 move than just moving out to b6. In this case, it's just covering that, but also it's making room for that knight to come to e7 to challenge the knight on d5. So this is such a common idea, challenging the knight on d5. And once that goes, then, well, black is absolutely fine. So, for example, if a4, then knight e7 is a good move. Just exchanging off that knight. Anyway, let's come back here. White decides to play knight b6, and black exchanged off the knight. Okay, here's a question for you. How would you play with black in this position? There's a kind of couple of obvious moves which I don't think are correct. So, for example, f5, which is often a break you can play in the Kalashnikov. In this case, I don't think black gets enough play on the king side, and after c4, that stops the d5 move. I think, this bishop is quite annoying, controlling d8 and queen d2, rook d1. There's some pressure here. So I don't like f5 here. Okay, what about d5? That's so often the move that liberates black's position. Here I don't like it either, because after this, for example, a rook comes to d1, and you can see the bishop controls the d8 square. So white takes control of the d file, and those two bishops look pretty good. So that's no good. So what did black play? Really good move. Knight e7. The threat is queen c6 attacking the bishop and the pawn. So f3 supports the e-pawn. Queen c6. Bishop came back to f2. And now d5. Now, this d5 pawn break is fundamental to the Kalashnikov. So often, if black gets in this break, it liberates black's pieces. Not only that, as we're going to see, it actually allows black to win control of the center, because black has a greater number of pawns in the center. That pawn on e5. I call this liberation station. Catch the train to liberation with the d-pawn. Freedom for that d-pawn and freedom for black's pieces, because this just transforms the position. So this d5 pawn break, something to watch out for. So watch this. E takes d5, knight takes d5. You can see black has this majority of pawns on the king side, in particular that pawn on e5, controlling the f4 and d4 squares. And you can see that black now controls the center, and that gives black possibilities to just take the initiative. It's a lovely position. And well, let's see how it plays out. Bishop d3, knight f4, of course. What a square for the knight. Beautiful, supported by that extra centre pawn on e5. Okay, here we go. Rook e1, pawn to f6. That's such a beautiful, solid pawn chain. Bishop came back to f1. Black moved the rook into the middle, attacks the queen. Queen c1. Bishop f5, excellent move. Hitting the pawn on c2, and white advanced, but that left the d3 square fatally weak. Now the bishop comes in. You can see how, I mean, the centre is so important here, and it just gave black extra freedom. Black exchanged on f1. Knight d3 is possible. I mean, that's a pretty good octopus. Unfortunately, after knight d3, you'd probably have to exchange off. I mean, that's still better for black, but in the game, this was more effective. Rook d3, and then rook fd8, just taking control of the d-file. Really simple, powerful moves. When you control the center, you control the game, you control the board. So white can't challenge here. Everything would be exchanged, and c4 hangs at the end of it. Bishop e3, well, don't want to have that one exchanged off. Knight comes back to e6. What a chunky square. Just behind that pawn chain and controlling d4 and f4. Beautiful. b3. So white is dreaming of challenging on the d-file. No way. That is a powerful lineup. Now, I mean, white should probably go back with the king, but I mean, obviously black has a huge advantage. I would actually, after king g1, I would actually consider playing g5 and h5, and possibly even breaking with g4 or advancing with h4. You can get away with that when you control the center. But anyway, white played king e2. He's obviously hoping to challenge with rook d1, but that's a forlorn hope. Check, forcing an exchange. Obviously, king queen forked, and now the king just gets cut to shreds. And here, white actually gave up straight away. I mean, obviously, the center is about to open, and the king won't stand a chance. White resigned. So, in terms of strategy, quite a simple game. Basically, black fought for control over these squares. Black managed to get in the d5 break, which gave black beautiful central control, and then just dominated the game. But I've seen this kind of strategy so many times in the Kalashnikov. And that's what I mean when I say that the Kalashnikov is actually quite a classical opening, but it has this dynamic twist to it, because obviously there's imbalance in this position, because we have an imbalanced pawn structure. And once the knight comes to b5, then there's all kinds of things strange things that can go on as well, just because of the odd placement of white's pieces, not black's especially, actually. But fundamentally, it's a classical opening because black has strong center pawns. So I'm going to show you more games with the Kalashnikov over the next week or so. But anyway, just to repeat, my Chessable course is published this Monday. I'm pretty sure it's this Monday. I'll let you know exactly. And I warmly recommend this opening. I think it's classical. It has a dynamic twist to it, but also it's very practical. You know, you get your opening in on the fourth move. That's important. So there we go. More coming soon. Thanks very much for watching.